My name is Jessica. This morning, my boyfriend fractured his penile cavernous body. The doctor wore a solemn expression and said, "How did this injury occur?" I glanced at David, who was sitting in a wheelchair and wearing a JK skirt. At that moment, I truly wished I could turn myself into feces and escape through the sewer from the hospital toilet. Here's what transpired. This morning, the sun was shining brightly and the sky was clear and serene. After I got up, washed up, and opened the curtain, the sunlight fell on the dressing table. The blue crystal ball with a crack reflected the sunlight, glittering brightly and exuding positive energy. On such a Sunday, not going on an outing would be an absolute sin. But when I looked at the bed, there was a completely naked, 120-pound lump of flesh. Hugging the quilt and snoring loudly, his buttocks were wrapped in a yellow SpongeBob SquarePants underwear. He resembled a maggot on the verge of suffocation. Instantly, anger welled up inside me. I accurately kicked SpongeBob's face with one foot. He touched his buttocks, changed his position, and continued snoring. I rushed over and delivered a series of 3 kicks. He covered his buttocks and got up. I shouted, "Look at this sunlight. You need to perk up." He leaped up and pretended to do a few push-ups. The small tent on SpongeBob's nose rubbed up and down on the sheet. Lying on the bed, he asked, "Believe it or not, I can support myself with 2 middle fingers?" I replied, "Don't be so reckless." David didn't believe it and assumed a push-up position. First, his right hand turned into a middle finger for support, and then his left hand also changed from a palm to a finger. Fearing that someone across the way might see this mentally disabled person through the window, I turned around to draw the curtain. Before I could even turn back, a shrill scream resounded through the air, "Ah!" When I saw him again, he was already writhing on the bed like a maggot that had just been castrated. He covered his lower body and shouted on the bed, "Jessica, it seems that my penile cavernous body is fractured." In just 1 second, his fingers couldn't hold on anymore. The bulge on SpongeBob's nose accurately landed and endured pressure that it shouldn't have borne at this age. I know that when that thing is hard, it can actually fracture. I said, "I don't know you. Don't call my name." He said, "Jessica, call 120 quickly." I said, "I won't." He said, "Jessica, if this thing is broken, it's you who will suffer." I picked up my phone and dialed 120. To avoid secondary trauma, I didn't allow him to wear pants and directly put on a JK skirt for him. When the ambulance arrived, the doctor was amazed and said, "Young people really play wild." I said, No. This is something he did by himself. It has nothing to do with me." The doctor looked at the JK skirt on my boyfriend and revealed the t-shirt under his white coat. He pointed to the rainbow pattern on his body and said, I understand. On the weekend, everyone was resting at home. Just after the epidemic, people were extremely sensitive to the sound of the ambulance siren and came out one after another to find out what had happened. As soon as I walked out the door, the grandma next door who often helped me with my packages asked with concern, "Jessica, what's wrong?" I said, "My boyfriend's penile cavernous body is damaged." The grandma touched her chest and heaved a sigh of relief. "As long as it's not COVID-19. I said, "Don't worry. This disease is not contagious. Especially for women, they definitely won't get it." Grandma said, That's good. "Hey, girl, what is the penile cavernous body?" I pretended not to hear and pushed David, who was wearing a JK skirt, straight to the elevator entrance in a wheelchair. That day, people in the entire community witnessed me pushing a perverted man in a JK skirt onto the ambulance. The doctor carefully recorded and continued to ask, "What's your relationship?" Really, the more I endure, the angrier I get. I replied, "He is my son. When he was 9 years old, his brain was kicked by a donkey. Since then, I have been taking care of him." The doctor didn't even look up and said, "If possible, have another one." I said, "Thank you, doctor. Please help me see how to deal with this thing." I lifted the JK skirt on David and pointed at SpongeBob's nose and asked. After a thorough examination, the doctor said, "There is slight swelling. It's not a big problem. After a period of rest, it can still be used." David had a flattering expression and held the doctor's hand and said, "Thank you. You are truly like Huatua reborn, with magical hands bringing back spring." The doctor said, however, it should still be reminded that boys should not be overconfident. It's also okay to use some small toys. David said, "Okay. Can this be covered by medical insurance?" The doctor said, "Let me take a look." I picked up David's wheelchair and walked out. "Doctor, sorry. We'll leave first." "What on earth is this? Going through medical insurance? Is this even reasonable? Medical insurance can't afford to lose face like this either." The people who formulated the medical insurance rules never expected that someone would be stupid enough to prop themselves up with their third leg. "David, you are really too much." On the way home, David leaned on my shoulder. "Jessica, did you hear that? The doctor said it won't affect yous." I said, "I don't care if it affects yous or not. It won't work for me anymore. I swear that if he has this kind of situation again, we will break up. In fact, on our first date, I should have realized that this guy is a complete fool. You never know what strange ideas are in his little head." David is 2 years younger than me. He was my neighbor when I was a child. After graduating, he came to the city where I am to look for a job. Just entering society, he is like an adult maca-paca. Every movement reveals childishness. He also always comes to bother me. For some reason, although I say it's annoying, I always look forward to him coming to find me. I can always find a familiar feeling on him. So much so that several times when I had supper with him, I got drunk. I looked at the blue crystal ball on the dressing table and was lost in thought. Terrible images flooded into my mind: blood, brain matter, screams. I forced myself to calm down, trying to use the memory of my first date with David to resist this image. For our first official date, he chose a rather upscale seafood restaurant. I spent 3 hours putting on a full face of makeup, wearing small high heels and a princess skirt, carrying a small LV bag and spraying YSL perfume. I had to be the prettiest one tonight. As soon as I arrived at the restaurant, I saw David wearing flip-flops and a loose t-shirt. To my relief, it seemed that he had specially washed his hair. As soon as you enter the restaurant, there is a huge water tank, just like a small aquarium. I pointed to one of the fish and said, "This guy looks delicious." He gazed at that fish intently and said, "Indeed, it must be excellent." The waiter led us to our reserved seat, number 69. The young lady glanced at the seat number and remarked, "Number 69. A very good number. Have a pleasant meal, you too. I am Xiao Yuan, the waiter for this table. If you need anything, feel free to call me." David and I blushed and smiled. I took out my makeup mirror and noticed that my makeup was a bit smudged. Thus, I found an excuse and went to the restroom. Friends, you would never imagine what our adorable boyfriend could do during the few minutes while I was touching up my makeup. Anyway, after I finished touching up my makeup and returned to my seat, my lovely boyfriend was gone. Not only did my boyfriend disappear, but even Xiao Yuan, the exclusive waiter for table number 69, vanished as well. I double-checked the table number. It was indeed number 69. I hadn't gone to the wrong place. I looked around. There was no one in sight. Not only was Xiao Yuan gone, but the waiters from the previous tables were also nowhere to be found. I envisioned all possible scenarios. Could it be that during my makeup session, David and Xiao Yuan had fallen in love at first sight and decided to abandon me and fly away together? No way. I had already begun to cry. This was the first time I had put on a full face of makeup for a man, but he had eloped with a waiter. I was deeply immersed in the melodramatic scenario I had imagined and couldn't extricate myself. Xiao Yuan rushed over hastily and said, "Sister, come quickly." I said, "What's wrong?" Xiao Yuan was out of breath and pulled me to run towards the hall. When I saw this scene in front of me, I was stunned. I would rather David elope with Xiao Yuan than see him drowning in the large fish tank. All the waiters in the restaurant were using nets to fish him out. The diners put down their bowls and chopsticks and came over to watch. Passers-by also entered to find out what was going on. More and more people gathered. I vaguely heard someone outside the door chatting. What's going on inside? It seems that there is a mermaid performance that has been quite popular on the internet recently. Why is that mermaid a man? This is where the merchant is clever. You've seen female mermaids a lot and they're not rare. But a male one makes you come and watch, right? I was so angry that my blood rushed straight to my head. If I were guilty, the law would punish me, not let a brain-damaged boyfriend who can't swim act as a mermaid in a seafood hotel's fish tank and be watched by people. Finally, with the efforts of the restaurant, David was fished out. There was a diner nearby who was a doctor. After examining him, he said it was mild unconsciousness and he would wake up in a few hours. Xiao Yuan told me everything that happened after I went to the restroom. As soon as I entered the restroom, David took the menu and was ready to order. After looking around, he asked Xiao Yuan if he could go to the tank in the hall and look at the fish while ordering. Xiao Yuan said it was okay. So, David came to the hall and specifically pointed to the fish I had taken a fancy to. Really naughty. He really dares to court death. He said that it was his first date with his girlfriend and he wanted to catch that fish himself and give it to his girlfriend as a gift. He could pay a little more. It must be admitted that the restaurant service is really impeccable. The waiters brought him a ladder and also gave him a net. 2 minutes later, he became a mermaid in the fish tank. I stared at David, who was in a coma. There was no way but to take him home. I dried his hair and put on my pajamas for him. On our first date, before we even had a meal, he ended up sleeping with me. Sleeping in the same bed, and I had to personally change his clothes. The next morning, when he woke up and looked at his flowery pajamas, he asked, "Jessica, who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going?" I said, "You are a brain-damaged person. You were fished out of the tank. You almost sent yourself away." He got up, washed up, and dried his hair. I asked him to listen to my instructions. Jump. Shake your head up and down, left and right, like dancing at a disco. Tilt your head to the left, lift your right foot off the ground, and jump on your left foot. Do it again in the opposite direction. Okay, no problem. David said, "Jessica, you are so good to me. Do you want to see if I have recovered?" I said, "I want to see how much water is in your brain." David said, "I just wanted to catch that fish for you to eat yesterday." I said, "I know. As a result, you almost got eaten by the fish." He picked up the blue crystal ball on my table with a crack. "You seem to like blue very much, huh?" My heart gave a twitch. I used to. Now it's just SOSO. He said, "Why?" I said, "Princess's business. Mind your own." He said, "Your crystal ball is cracked. I'll buy you a new one." I snatched the blue crystal ball. No need. I don't like him touching my crystal ball. He thinks he knows the meaning of this crystal ball. In fact, everything has changed since I was 14 years old. He said, "Then I'll find a place to repair this crack for you." I said, "It can't be repaired." He said, "I will definitely be able to repair it." I cried in his arms. After that day, we were together. In fact, I don't understand either. As a cold and independent career woman, why would I fall in love with a brain-damaged boyfriend who is a programmer? As the creative director of an advertising company, I am not short of excellent suitors around me, founders of unicorn companies, managers of top 500 companies, and rich second generations. Perhaps it's because he is my childhood friend. Perhaps it's because he is quite pleasing to look at. Oh, forget it. Love is just like this, unclear and unexplainable. If you can still be clear-headed in love, then it's probably not love. Of course, occasional silliness is cute, but if you keep being silly again and again, it's really mental retardation. Sometimes I suspect that all his stupid behaviors are intentional. A few months after his penile cavernous body was damaged, he got himself killed and the police station came to conduct an autopsy. That day, I took my subordinates to a neighboring city to discuss business. It was a crucial time to finalize the project price. Both sides were secretly competing. There was a price difference of 1 million in the end. In fact, with our current quotation, we already have sufficient profit. But I always feel that the other party's offer can still be higher. At this time, my phone started vibrating non-stop. I saw that it was the number of the grandma next door. Most likely, there was a package. I hung up. Immediately, it vibrated again. I hung up again. It vibrated again. I hung up again. This repeated 10 times. I felt something was wrong. Under normal circumstances, if I hang up twice, grandma next door will know that I am in a meeting and wait for me to call back after I finish. The phone vibrated once more. I rose to my feet and said to everyone, "Sorry, I'll step outside to take this call." As soon as I answered, on the other end of the line, Grandma was panting and speaking in a tearful tone, "Girl. I tell you. Don't be overly sad. See if there's a chair nearby. Sit down first." My heart gave a jolt. I found a stool and sat down. "Grandma, I'm sitting." "Go on." "Grandma, your boyfriend has been killed. The body is lying at the stairway entrance. I just opened the door and saw your door was open and there was no one inside. When I looked at the stairway entrance, I saw a person wrapped in a white bag and there was blood on the ground. I've already called the police. Come back quickly." I walked into the meeting venue and said to the partner, "Let's settle on this price. Something has happened at home. You can communicate with my assistant regarding the subsequent matters." I drove the company's car and sped at 140, all the way on the highway. The memories of David and me began to play back in my mind. He caught fish for me, he wore a skirt and danced to amuse me, he damaged his penile cavernous body by using 2 fingers as support. He held my most precious blue crystal ball and said he would repair that crack. There will never be another person who makes my life so lively, there will never be another fool who is scolded by me every day, there will never be another man who, clearly not knowing how to swim, still goes to catch fish in the fish tank for me. I cried as I drove, and could barely even see the road clearly. I activated adaptive cruise control and lane keeping. On urban roads, I drove straight ahead regardless of red lights or green lights. For a moment, I even wanted to follow him. Finally, I arrived downstairs. I grabbed the car keys and, without even bothering to wipe away my tears, rushed upstairs. The door was ajar. Pushing it open, it might be his corpse. I broke down once again. I took a deep breath and summoned up my courage to push the door open. When I saw the scene inside, I immediately went to the kitchen and picked up a knife. In the room, David had a bandage wrapped around his head. He was sitting with his legs crossed. There was a cigarette in his left hand and a bottle of snow draft beer in his right hand. There were beef jerky and drunken peanuts on the coffee table. He was chatting casually with several police officers from the police station. The grandma from the next room was also sitting there, smiling. When the police officers saw me running out of the kitchen with a kitchen knife in hand, they were frightened and immediately picked up the riot shield. "Little girl, calm down. Your boyfriend is fine." "My boyfriend is fine?" I picked up the knife precisely because he was fine. Wasn't he murdered? Wasn't he dumped like a corpse? My emotions were all in place. I had run out of tears. I had lost the 1 million in the project quotation. I had run through several red lights and had all my driver's license points deducted. As soon as I came back, I saw this guy sitting on the sofa smoking, drinking and chatting. If I didn't pick up a knife to hack someone, what else could I do? David raised his hand and shouted, "Jessica, listen to me defend myself." "No, listen to me explain." I put down the kitchen knife. "You'd better defend yourself reasonably." David extinguished his cigarette and talked about yesterday. Yesterday was April 1st, April Fool's Day. He was planning to play a prank to scare me. His prank method was extremely stupid. His plan was to hide himself in the quilt cover. When I came home from work and opened the door and walked into the bedroom, he would jump up from the bed and pretend to be a quilt cover that had become a spirit. So, this brain-damaged person got himself into the quilt cover at 6 o'clock in the afternoon and waited for me to come home from work. I usually get home at 6:30. But on that day, a project came up temporarily, which was the one in the neighboring city. In the adult world, there is no April Fool's Day. There is only Q2. I had a sudden business trip and sent him a text message. This brain-damaged person hid in the quilt until he fell asleep and I still didn't come back. The longer he waited, the more anxious he became. He wanted to open the quilt cover zipper and come out to take a look. Only then did he find out that the quilt cover zipper could only be opened from the outside. And our quilt cover happened to be newly changed. Made in China, it is made of Xinjiang long staple cotton material and the quality is excellent. It couldn't be torn open either. He was hungry, stuffy, and didn't bring his mobile phone. So he had to rely on his memory, feel his way along the wall, and go out to seek help from neighbors. After going out, he couldn't find the direction. He stepped on the stairs and rolled down, hitting his head and fainting. In the morning, Grandma from the neighboring room got up and saw my door wide open. There was a person wrapped in a white sheet at the stairway. There was still blood seeping on the ground. So she quickly called the police and bombarded my mobile phone. I put the knife back in the kitchen and saw off the police uncles. For a moment, I didn't know whether I should be angry or relieved. I was extremely angry, but not completely furious. I said, "Your brain was already not working well. After this knock, it's probably even worse." "David, what do you know? Walnuts that have been clamped by a door can still nourish the brain, right? My knocked head is still useful." After this act of courting death, David became much more well-behaved. It's not because he has become honest, but rather because every spark of his act of courting death is extinguished at the source. After getting off work in the evening, I couldn't help but praise him. "You have behaved well recently and haven't caused me any trouble." David got into my arms. "Well, my penile cavernous body has almost recovered. I get lost. That thing of yours belongs to a major repair item. The quality and stability are not reliable anymore. David, test it." During the test that night, the doctor didn't lie. It really didn't affect use. Just on the third day after I praised him, he did something so extreme that led us to break up completely. This time, I cannot forgive. On our second anniversary of being in love, he and a few friends planned a grand marriage proposal ceremony. After getting off work, David held a bouquet of flowers and came to pick me up downstairs at my office building. Then he took me to a lawn in the suburbs. There was a light yellow stage, a passage covered with flower petals. On both sides were fresh flowers. Beside the flowers stood little white ponies. In the middle of the stage was a huge blue crystal ball with a crack on it too. When I saw that crystal ball, my heart twitched. The closer I walked, the more something seemed off. Why were the necks of these little ponies so long? A bit closer, I was furious. My fists were clenched. These little ponies were indeed horses, but they were alpacas. I asked, "You use alpacas to propose to me? David, don't you think it's very cute?" I gritted my teeth. Forget it. It was indeed quite cute. 10 minutes later, I would pay a huge price for my current thought. The marriage proposal ceremony began. The host appeared and friends took their seats. My boyfriend gave an impassioned speech and invited me to come on stage. More and more people were watching. He took my hand and pointed to the crystal ball behind him and said, "Jessica Wine, I hope I can be the one who mends the cracks in your life." Then, he made an action that I couldn't understand with extreme confidence. The people in the audience seemed to be prepared, while all I could think was, "This guy is crazy." He took out scissors from his pants pocket and forcefully stabbed the crystal ball behind him. The crystal ball was a plastic sphere filled with blue liquid. With this stab, the crystal ball exploded. David and I were dyed into avatars. The scene also turned into a complete mess. Friends in the audience were busy avoiding the blue liquid. The most chaotic were those dozen or so alpacas. After being frightened, they ran wild on the scene and spat at people when they saw them. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared without a trace. And at this moment, what was surging in my heart were hundreds of thousands of alpacas. After working until 2 a.m., finally with the help of all our good friends, we found all the alpacas. The alpacas themselves couldn't have imagined that taking on a marriage proposal job could result in an explosion. After returning home, something even more devastating happened. The blue paint on David and me couldn't be washed off. We contacted the manufacturer of the crystal ball. They said it would fade automatically after 2 weeks. It's not harmful to human skin. I looked at the avatar in the mirror and thought of that huge blue crystal ball. I cried. I grabbed the blue crystal ball on the dressing table and smashed the mirror. David walked in. I'm sorry. I said, get out. David, I won't. I said, what else can you do besides causing trouble? You are a brain-damaged person, do you know that? I said, I don't like blue crystal balls. I keep it by my side not because I like it, but because. Forget it. Let's break up. I'm tired and don't want to take care of you anymore. This blue paint will take half a month to fade. You go live in a hotel for half a month. Come back and pack your things in half a month. Don't bother me again from now on. David, I know you're just saying angry words. I said, do you think you know me very well? You don't know what I like at all, and you don't know what I need either. You only make me look bad and make it impossible for me to live a normal life like a brain-damaged person. David, I understand. David carried a bag, packed a few changes of clothes, took his toiletries, and went out. I stared at the blue crystal ball on the dressing table and burst into loud sobs. David, my name is David, Jessica Wang's boyfriend. Jessica Wang is the cutest girl in the world. I thought so when I was 8 years old. When we were little, Jessica Wang lived next door to me. She had an older brother named Wang Shu. Wang Shu is 2 years older than Jessica. Jessica is 2 years older than me. At first, it was Wang Shu who took care of Jessica, and Jessica took care of me. But after Wang Shu turned 6, it became Jessica taking me and Wang Shu. Because the doctor said that Wang Shu's intellectual level had remained at 6 years old. When I was 6 years old, it became me and Jessica taking Wang Shu to play every day. At that time, Wang Shu often did some stupid things. For example, when Jessica and I said a certain fish was very beautiful, he would stick half of his body into the fish tank to catch that fish. As a result, the water quality was polluted and all the fish in the tank turned belly up. Jessica still had to patiently change his clothes. For example, he always liked to play pranks and put potato chip crumbs and bubble gum in my and Jessica's pockets. Every time we went home and were discovered by our mothers, we couldn't escape a beating. When playing hide-and-seek, Wang Shu always liked to hide in the bed sheet. We always pretended not to find him. Time passed quickly. Jessica entered junior high school, and I also started 4th grade. The things we played, Wang Shu gradually couldn't understand. But every weekend Jessica would still bring Wang Shu along. To make Wang Shu play quietly by the side, Jessica bought a blue crystal ball and made up a fairy tale. She told Wang Shu, this crystal ball contains Jessica's soul. So, your task is to protect this crystal ball. If the crystal ball is broken, Jessica will leave you. In this way, every time when Jessica and I played games and watched anime, as long as we put the crystal ball on the table, Wang Shu would guard it quietly. This kind of life continued until Jessica was 14 years old. That year, Jessica's family moved away. No one knew why. All people knew was that Wang Shu died in a car accident. Later, I desperately asked my mom to call Jessica's parents. My mom said that it was inappropriate because Wang Shu had just had an accident. Gradually, I also lost hope in finding out the truth. It's just that I often think of Jessica. She was so good to me. Why did she leave without saying goodbye? After I graduated from college and returned to my hometown, I found that someone was living next door again. My mom said that Jessica's parents had moved back. I was very excited and bought 2 bottles of wine and a box of fruits to visit. Jessica's mother told me everything. When Jessica was 14 years old, she took Wangshu to the bookstore center to buy comics. On the way home by bus, the blue crystal ball was placed on the side of the school bag. When she sat by the window, the crystal ball fell out of the window. Wangshu jumped out of the window. Jessica's mother said that crystal ball wasn't Xiaoshu's favorite toy. I don't know why he did that. I know. Because in his eyes, that ball was Jessica's soul. He didn't want it to break. He couldn't let Jessica leave it. Jessica's mother added, after Xiaoshu had the accident, Jessica kept crying while holding that crystal ball. She also kept insisting on moving and refused to live in this house. Now that we've moved back, she still refuses to come back. Pippi, if you have a chance, try to persuade her. I nodded. I learned from Jessica's mother the city where Jessica works. I decided to look for her. She had become a person I didn't recognize at all. Cold, hypocritical, and overwhelmed by work. She was trying to numb herself with busyness. She should be a warm-hearted and kind girl. She had been carrying Wangshu's accident on her own all this time. Without a suitable opportunity, I could only find various excuses and trouble Jessica to help me solve them. Today, I couldn't find a suitable company. Tomorrow, I couldn't find a place to live. The day after tomorrow, the water heater broke and there was no place to take a bath. With the foundation of our childhood, finally we gradually became familiar. During several late-night snacks, she got very drunk. With a slurred tongue, she kept saying that she had killed her brother. For her own pleasure, she made up a malicious lie and finally killed her brother. She dared not go back to her hometown anymore. Every corner of that house would remind her of her brother. I decided to save her. Yes, all my stupid actions were intentional. Every time I caused trouble, she seemed disgusted but never got tired of it. Gradually, I saw that warm and familiar her come back again. But the most important thing is that I want her to understand that living well in the present is more important than immersing in the past. On many occasions, I wanted to have a good talk with her about the blue crystal ball, but she always evaded. I didn't mean to mess up that marriage proposal. Originally, my plan was that the blue crystal ball had 2 layers of plastic film. The first layer had a crack on it, and the inner layer was perfect. I wanted to express that I wanted to be with Jessica and accompany her to repair every crack in life. But who knew that the weather was so hot that day? The plastic had been exposed to the sun for a whole day and became thinner. I didn't control the strength well and it burst. Both Jessica and I were dyed into avatars. She got angry like never before. After being kicked out, I found the grandma next door. Seeing me all blue, Grandma said, "Pippi, are you doing that cosplay? My granddaughter plays this. I heard that many people like it." I nodded. "Yes, Grandma. Our recent theme is Avatar. Grandma, oh, I see. Is there anything wrong?" I said, "Grandma, I want to rent a room from you for half a month." "Grandma, what's wrong? Did you have a fight with Jessica?" I nodded. "Yes. She kicked me out. I'm worried about her. I'm afraid something will happen to her if I live too far away. So." Grandma quickly led me into the house. Come. No need to pay rent. You live in the secondary bedroom. My grandson often lives there. Just keep Grandma company." Jessica stayed in the room for 2 weeks without going out. In the middle, I asked Grandma to help check on the situation twice. Grandma said everything was normal. She was working from home. On the 15th day, I saw Jessica go out with a bag on her shoulder from the balcony. I followed her all the way. She sat down on a chair by the lake in the Central Park. She was holding the blue crystal ball and looking at it all the time. The ringtone of her mobile phone interrupted her thoughts. She put the crystal ball on the chair and reached for her mobile phone from her bag sideways. The bottom of the bag rubbed against the crystal ball. The blue crystal ball rolled down towards the lake along the slope. I rushed out and plunged into the water. When I woke up, I was already in Jessica's bedroom. Jessica, why are you following me? I said, I'm worried about you. Jessica, pervert. I said, where's the crystal ball? Jessica, in the lake. I said, it's all my fault. Jessica, it's already your fault. You can't swim at all, but still jumped in. If you hadn't jumped in, I could have fished it up by myself. As soon as you jumped in, I had to save you. I said, Jessica, the crystal ball has sunk to the bottom of the lake. Jessica, in a while, let's go back to our hometown together. Jessica whined. During the 2 weeks when I became an avatar, I thought a lot. Suddenly, I understood why I could never really hate David even though he was so silly. Why the more he courted death, the deeper our bond became. Because his behavior is so much like my brother's. He reminded me of many things from when we were little. The story of the three of us growing up together, including the process of my brother changing from an older brother to a younger brother. I looked at myself in the mirror and seemed like a different person. Not referring to the appearance of becoming an avatar, but the soul. After David appeared, I no longer kept people at a distance and pretended to be strong. I seemed to have turned back into the me at 14. The moment David jumped into the lake, I remembered the moment when my brother jumped out of the car. Looking at the crystal ball and David in the lake, I swam towards David without hesitation. At that moment, many fragments flashed through my mind. I thought I had always been taking care of my brother. But I forgot that before I was 6 years old, my brother had been my brother for 6 years. No matter how old I grew, he would always be my brother. When we were little, when sharing snacks, I always didn't have enough. He would save his share and give it to me when I cried and still wanted more. So when I grew up, when sharing snacks, he would secretly stuff his share into my and David's pockets. He didn't know that we could already buy a lot of snacks by ourselves. Because his world had stopped at 6 years old. When I was little, I played hide and seek and hid in the bed sheet. As a result, I couldn't open the zipper inside and cried for a long time. From then on, to prevent me and David from hiding in the bed sheet and getting into danger, my brother would always be the first to hide in the bed sheet. I always thought that David would only cause trouble for me and make me worry. Until my mom called me and asked me when I would go back to my hometown to take a look. She said that David had bought a lot of things and gone to our house. After learning about my situation over the years, he said he would definitely persuade me to go back to my hometown. Only then did I understand that in fact, it had always been David who was healing me. Since the crystal ball has already sunk to the bottom of the lake, let the soul return to me and love the people who are protecting me by my side well. After the Avatar incident, we went back to our hometown together. David returned to normal. Occasionally, he would have some strange ideas, but they all became joys of life. A year later, we decided to get married. Yes, you guessed it right. The day before the wedding, he did something stupid again. He insisted on emulating The Hangover and having a crazy bachelor party before the wedding. A group of friends had 10 bottles of Jägermeister mixed with Red Bull on the roof. Just like in the plot of The Hangover, early in the morning of the wedding, a group of friends found that everyone was there except David. Only a yellow SpongeBob SquarePants underwear of David was hanging on an exposed steel bar on the rooftop, fluttering in the wind. Several unkempt rough men stood awkwardly in front of me. The one in the lead held the folded SpongeBob SquarePants underwear with both hands and bowed to apologize. Sister-in-law, sorry. We drank and lost the groom. Only a SpongeBob SquarePants underwear is left at the scene. I threw my veil on the ground. Go find him quickly. If I can't get married today, none of you will get away. I stood by the window and saw 3 or 4 cars driving off in different directions downstairs. The makeup artist finished doing my makeup and asked, when will the groom have his makeup done? I looked at my watch and then out the window. It's about time. Let's do it now. I walked into the bedroom and woke David up. Get up. David rubbed his eyes. What time is it? I said, get up now and do your makeup. There's still time to get married. David jumped up from the bed. Where are my friends? I said, I asked them to decorate the venue. David bounced on the bed. I thought I would have to sleep on the rooftop last night. Last night, when they were all drunk and confused, I went up to the rooftop to take a look and help David back to the room. I flicked his forehead. My Jessica's husband can only sleep in my bed.